There is a concern, in my mind a very valid concern, in the West, among some groups of the native population regarding accepting migrants. This concern is that extremist militants will use this movement as a source of cover to enter Western countries and commit terroristic acts, exploiting human tragedy that they may have caused in part in order to spread into new areas of conquest in the guise of sheep's clothing. And some people, often leftists, will claim that this is a conspiracy theory, or that it could never happen. But it can. It tragically can. Ask the 129 people of Paris who were left splattered across the ground in November 2015 how this practice of accepting refugees from a war zone that they helped create worked out for them. Down here in Australia, new information has recently come to light which could prove pivotal in the debate on should we accept migrants from third world war zones. And it's a debate that we really need to engage with down here in Australia, because there is a movement that suggests that we should just throw open the borders and let in anyone who comes here should be let in. All the people on Nauru, Christmas Island, don't even vet them, just let them in, and that sort of thing. So on to the information at hand. A literal ISIS fighter, codenamed BSX-15 by the Australian Security Intelligence Organisation, was let into Australia after just changing 2 letters in his name. BSX-15 was an individual who attempted to illegally enter Australia in 2012. He was subsequently stopped and moved to the Christmas Island offshore detention facility. BSX-15 was given a bridging visa and was allowed to enter Australia, where he lived for a year. So I've got this from www.findlaw.com. A bridging visa is a temporary visa which enables a non-citizen to remain lawfully in Australia even though they do not hold a substantive visa. A non-citizen is capable of applying for a bridging visa whilst in criminal detention. Now, as a quick aside, this makes absolutely no sense to me whatsoever. We should not reward people who attempt to illegally enter Australia by letting them enter Australia, as this only incentivizes people to come to Australia illegally and either die on the boat trip on the way over, no one wants to talk about that, or come to Australia and, as I've explained in previous videos, leech off welfare and such and so forth. Anyways, moving on. BSX-15 claimed he was a Shia Muslim of Kurdish descent from Mandali on the border of Iraq and Iran, and his family had been persecuted by the dictator Saddam Hussein because of their Shia beliefs. That's from the Daily Telegraph. Religious discrimination is a legitimate case for asylum. BSX-15 should not have been treated as an economic migrant, but as a legitimate asylum seeker. This was an individual who clearly knew how to play the Western immigration system. Around a year after being let into Australia, BSX-15 got married and was officiated by a Sunni imam. This obviously raised some eyebrows at ASIO. This is of course a case for raised eyebrows, as the Shiites and the Sunnis are the 2 major opposing denominations of Islam. They basically hate each other and have been in a sort of religious civil war ever since the death of the Prophet Muhammad. Why is a Shiite getting his marriage officiated by a Sunni? BSX-15 was taken in for questioning at a Melbourne immigration office over concerns about his true background. He was questioned for 11 hours over 3 sessions. During the questioning, he revealed that he was in fact not religious. Now this of course contradicts his reason for asylum. If he was not religious, then he could not possibly have been religiously persecuted. Therefore, he should not have been given the status of an asylum seeker and let into Australia. This is of course one of the big problems with accepting migrants from third world war zones, as of course they can just throw out their passports, make up a story, and there's no real way for you to check who they are. How was it possible to check if BSX-15 was in fact a Shia? There was no possible way to check this with any identification, like a passport, any kind of religious documentation, and that sort of thing. And this of course is exactly how you get problems just like this. If we can't tell who people are, it is certainly best to err on the side of caution. So now, the real big kicker. After questioning, BSX-15 was taken into custody after it was revealed that he was a known ISIS member. The link between BSX-15 and a known ISIS member was made after it was observed that BSX-15's name was the same as the ISIS member's name, but with an extra N and I added. This is an elementary difference. How could you not possibly spot this? How much money are we throwing into ASIO and border security for them to just fuck it up like this? This is where your tax dollars are going. An extra 2 letters in a person's name and you can't link them to a known ISIS member. This is fucking atrocious. And this is all part of the organization that controls everything. The money, the borders, the schools. Everything in Australia is controlled by the government. And this is the results that they provide for us. Literally fucking nothing. Something that a 2-year-old could spot. Now, BSX 15 is currently appealing his security threat assessment, all at the taxpayer's expense of course, as ASIO did not specifically ask him whether he was indeed the known ISIS member, and this is apparently an issue of procedural fairness. Now, as this is legalistic bullshit and not my area of expertise, I will not comment on this. If this story shakes your confidence in the ability of the Australian government, then good, it absolutely should. The Australian government jobs in general, do not compete in a meritocracy. They have a monopoly over certain things, and this lack of competition ensures that we do not get the best possible service. Imagine a shopping centre with only one cafe. This is the only place you can get coffee within the local area. Now this cafe, as it doesn't have to compete with other cafes, can basically do what it wants within reason. It can charge higher prices. It can deliver a lower quality of service, as people can't just wander over to the next cafe. Now imagine a shopping centre in which there are 2 cafes. Suddenly, each cafe has to perform to a higher standard, lower its prices, provide better service, and things like that, as if people do not like your service, or your price structure, or anything like that, they can just go next door and go to the other cafe. Thus, we can see how competition ensures the best possible service. However, as I've mentioned already, the government doesn't compete with anyone. It just has complete control over everything. The government, for example, retains complete control over Australia's borders. You, if you own property on the coast, don't get to decide what happens to your particular area of coastline. If the government decides that we have open borders, then we have open borders. You are not allowed to deter boats from coming to your coastline. No, you would probably be arrested because Australia has retarded self-defence laws, and you basically can't own property in Australia either. And with institutions like ASIO and the Border Security Service, we can't merely unsubscribe if we're unsatisfied with their job. No, we're absolutely stuck with them. We have no choice. We have to let ASIO provide security intelligence operations. And of course, I'm not saying that there's absolutely no incentive for the government to do its job. They do want to get re-elected and therefore paid after all. But there is certainly a lowered ceiling of incentive. ASIO, for example, is not worried that you're going to go unsubscribe and sign up to the CIA spying package. You can't just call them up and say, hey, I'm not going to give you my tax dollars anymore because you receive a knock from the policeman. Government services are not based on voluntarism. They are based on force. If you do not pay, you are forced to pay. And if you refuse to be forced to pay, you will be thrown into jail or worse, killed. And then we get onto the people that we give this power to initiate the use of force to. Here we have Greens leader Richard Di Natale saying, quote, brainwashed ISIS terrorists should be allowed back into Australia. He has suggested that good people make shocking decisions. Well, Richard, is someone who wants to go overseas to fight for a regressive, backwards religion truly a good person? Is someone who subscribes to the more militant sides of Islam, which say that women are property, women are items of conquest, you are allowed to kill anyone in times of conquest, and that Islam should be the dominant religion with Sharia law, are they truly a good person if they think this is the correct thing to do? And of course, will these ISIS fighters, being let back into the country, will they be placed in Richard Di Natale's house? Of course not. They will be supported on the public dollar by being thrown into jail. I really just want to shatter this idea that the government is a competent agency that has been brainwashed into you since childhood. Anyone who goes overseas to fight in the name of Islam has clearly spat upon what it means to be Australian and therefore what it means to be a Westerner. Why we would let them back into the nation, even if it's just to appear in court and be thrown in jail, is completely beyond me. So yes, big news of the day, government incompetence allows a literal ISIS fighter to be allowed into Australia after changing just 2 letters in his name. This indicates why we cannot just have an open border and let anyone in who is deported to Nauru, Christmas Island, anything like that. We need to be sure who these people are, and we cannot do that when they have no way to identify themselves. We must err on the side of caution. I will close with an often touted example. You've probably seen it, but it bears repeating. You are presented with an enormous bowl of lollies. You are told that a small percentage, even just 1% of these lollies, is poisoned. Do you let your child take an enormous handful of these lollies? I believe the answer to that one to be more than a little obvious. Thanks all for sticking around, and have a good one.